Good afternoon. Are you having a good time? Enjoying yourself? It is 3:15 and time for an amazing, insightful, inspiring keynote presentation. I'm Molly Bow. I'm here from Accenture. I'm the Connected Energy Lead in North America, and I am introducing an amazing gentleman who is going to be driving the next pivot point in energy transition all around nuclear. And I'm going to tell you a lot about why nuclear is at a critical inflection point in energy transition. And I'm going to tell you what Kelvin is here to talk about. But first, a little bit of context, a little bit of story, scene, setting for you. Nuclear power is taking center stage once again. It has ebbed and flowed. You might have strong thoughts about it. Very often, people do not have soft thoughts about it. But it is a massive, massive tool in the arsenal of clean, reliable, carbon-free power. And we are at a whole host of precipices right now. Energy transition is absolutely dominant in these United States, but we are also burning down a carbon deficit really fast. And we need an all of the above strategy, and nuclear is an enormous part of that. So in North Carolina, that conversation is going on strong. In 2021, the state became the only Republican-controlled legislature to pass a carbon bill. Anyone know which one it was? Pop quiz, students. Anyone? Bueller? Bueller. It was House Bill 951, and it commits North Carolina to achieving a 70% carbon reduction from electricity generation by 2030 from a 2005 baseline, and to reaching carbon neutrality by 2050. That's absolutely ambitious and huge. It was a bold bipartisan move that put the state at the forefront of climate leadership in the Southeast. HB 951 relies heavily on the retirement of coal plants and strategic investments in natural gas, renewables, and nuclear power. What Kelvin's going to talk about today. Duke Energy has been leading the charge, exploring how to replace coal plants with SMRs, small modular nuclear reactors, and conventional nuclear, taking advantage of existing sites and interconnection points to deploy more cleaner, more flexible energy solutions. And at the heart of this effort is today's keynote speaker, Kelvin Henderson. He's the Senior Vice President and Chief Nuclear Officer at Duke Energy. He's got decades of leadership in nuclear operations, and Kelvin has been at the forefront of shaping modern nuclear solutions, advancing technology, driving operational excellence, and ensuring nuclear's continued role in a clean energy future. And it is going to play a huge role in our clean energy future. At Duke Energy, one of the nation's largest, Kelvin oversees a fleet of 6 nuclear stations that provide over 11,000 megawatts of carbon-free power to millions of customers. Under his leadership, Duke has been a leader in extending the life of its nuclear fleet, modernizing operations, and pushing the boundaries of what's next, from large-scale baseload nuclear to next-gen tech like SMR. Today, Kelvin's going to share some insights on the evolving role of nuclear, how Duke is aligning its strategy with state and national climate goals, and tell you what we must do as an industry to strengthen our workforce, drive public trust, and accelerate nuclear deployment in the years ahead. Please join me in welcoming Kelvin to the stage.
So let me first start with some operating experience. So I just sat in the small modular reactor session, and my vice president of new nuclear, he was in the session. He did like 50% of my presentation. I'm like, so if anybody was in there, you can take a 30-minute nap because you're going to see some of the same discussion. I appreciate this opportunity to speak about nuclear. I think Mr. Mitchell from Dominion, he mentioned how nuclear is like the cool kids on the block. Again, before we spent years not talking about our technology because, quite frankly, people were afraid of the technology. And we can't do that anymore. We need to make sure that we're educating people. I tell people the story that when I first became Chief Nuclear Officer, I was on a plane going somewhere. I can't remember where I was going. I was sitting next to this guy that he was very talkative. And I'm not a very talkative person. He was very talkative. And he said, what's your name? Told him my name. He said, well, what do you do I said, well, I work for Duke Energy. He said, well, what do you do for Duke Energy? I'm a mechanical engineer. I said, I'm an engineer. I was a chief nuclear officer at the time. I said, I'm an engineer. He said, well, what do you do as an engineer? I said, I engineer things. And he said, well, what does that mean? I said, do you know what an engineer is? He said, yes. I said, that's what I do. And he and I just stared at each other. I said, I don't have anything else for you. I cannot allow opportunities like that to go by anymore. We need to sit down and explain to folks about our business and about our technology, just to educate people. And even if they're still will be, afraid or concerned, they're concerned based off of facts and not filling in the blanks of what they believe are facts. So I appreciate being here to share how Duke is positioning our existing fleet for mid-century operation and how we're exploring potential new nuclear opportunities. So let me start with customers expect their electricity to be there whenever they need it, every day without exception, and the demand is increasing more and more. At Duke, just like you've probably heard others mention, we're taking the all of above approach. Nuclear is a key element as we go through our energy transformation. Just a little more background about Duke. We serve 8.4 million customers. In multiple states, people might think that Duke is only in the Carolinas, North Carolina, South Carolina. We're also in Florida, Kentucky, Ohio, and Indiana. So 8.4 million customers. We have currently about a little bit over 54,000 megawatts of available energy capacity, 27,000 employees. And from a nuclear perspective, we operate 11 plants, 6 sites, the largest regulated nuclear fleet in the U.S., the second largest fleet in general. So a very, very decent sized fleet. But today I'll just focus my discussion on the Carolinas, where our nuclear energy is uniquely positioned to serve the growing needs of our customers and our communities. So let me talk a little bit about the current landscape. We are experiencing exponential growth and a demand for cleaner energy. We've been talking a lot to some of these hyperscalers where they need energy, but a lot of these hyperscalers also have clean energy strategic initiatives. So they want the energy, but then they also want a clean source of energy. New economic development, including manufacturing, technology projects across the Carolinas are the primary driver for increased electric demand. The peak load growth by 2030 is about 8 times. The peak load growth by 2030 is about 8 times the growth that we projected a few years ago. It's just staggering. We anticipate 3 to 4% load growth beginning in 2027, driven by this economic development that I just talked a little bit about. So how are we, Duke, meeting this moment? We are embarking on one of the largest energy transitions in the U.S. on a plan to net zero by 2050. And we believe strongly that executing this transition and achieving our reliable, clean energy future is not only possible with our existing fleet, but also evaluating new technologies. So if you sat in the SMR section, you heard Chris Nolan say this. So when we talk about our nuclear fleet in Duke, we talk about our fleet through the lens of today, tomorrow, and in the future. So let me start with today. It starts with operational excellence. Because nuclear is back on the radar screen again, we need to operate our existing fleet, not just Duke, but the entire industry with excellence. All it would take is some significant challenge at any plant, not only just in the U.S., but internationally, that could cause people to become concerned again with nuclear operations. So we can get enamored which we are with all these new nuclear opportunities, we cannot lose sight on how we're operating our existing fleet with excellence. And we should never compromise that, because if we do, this bright, shiny future will slowly start dimming very, very quickly. In the Carolinas, we produce about 11,000 megawatts of clean energy and more than 96% of the carbon-free energy for our customers in the Carolina. And we do this by maintaining our operating costs very low. Our Duke nuclear fleet, our operating cost is one of the lowest in the industry when you compare to other operating fleets. Our nuclear plants serve as the bedrock of our communities, contributing to economic growth of these communities and providing good paying jobs, really good paying jobs, and we generate significant tax credits. We have about 4,400 nuclear employees. About 6-7 years ago, that number was 6,600. And so if you just look at how we have gained efficiency and how we're operating our fleet through leveraging technology, making processes more efficient, we can do it with a smaller staff and still focus on that operational excellence that I spoke about before. So for today, focus on operational excellence and do it in a safe, reliable, and efficient manner. So for tomorrow, a key part of our strategy to meet the future energy demand is extending the life of our existing nuclear plants, maximizing their output, and also evaluating new nuclear technology. We were one of the first fleets in the industry that announced that we were going to extend the license of all of our 11 units. Instead of just announcing one unit at a time, we announced that we're going to extend the license of the fleet. So if you all aren't aware of how nuclear plants are licensed, when the plants were originally licensed, they were licensed to operate for 40 years. And then the industry went through what's called license renewal, where you could renew those licenses through a very robust, in-depth evaluation for another 20 years, so for up to 60 years. And now the industry is embarking on subsequent license renewal. So subsequent to the previous license renewal, where you can extend the licenses for another 20 years, for up to 80 years. We started with my Coney plant in Seneca, South Carolina, and I expect within the next few days, I'll be receiving notification that all three of those plants have life extensions for up to 80 years. We already started the process for our Robinson plant in Hartsville, North Carolina, where we expect to submit the application for the Robinson extension by the end of the second quarter. Approval of extending these operating licenses will be significant, as much of the growth in Carolinas is coming from the always-on industry that need power day in and day out in all weather conditions. And nuclear power is a highly reliable energy source that's always on and available 24 hours a day, and is carbon-free. So let me give you an example. So bear with me while I brag a little bit. One of my sites is shut down right now for a planned refueling outage. Before we shut that plant down, it operated for more than 720 consecutive days. 720 consecutive days without any interruption. Literally, we were running out of gas. I mean, the plant was coasting down. When we finally made it to the refueling outage, it was down around 70% because we had maximized the generation or the energy source in that reactor. And again, that's clean, a clean source of energy that's supporting our customers in a reliable manner. All of our other plants are somewhere around 150 or higher in consecutive days of operations. So we have a pretty strong operating fleet. Our capacity factor has been more than 90% for over 20 consecutive years. and we take pride in that. But the reason that exists is our focus on maintaining the plant, maintaining reliability, and doing the work that we're doing now at my plant that's shut down and for a refueling outage to set that plant up for another long operating cycle. It's not the longest operating cycle. They actually thought about delaying their refueling outage by 3 days just to beat the fleet record. And I actually thought about it. I actually thought about allowing them to do it, but we didn't do that. We're also evaluating and embarking on actions to add nearly 300 megawatts of new nuclear, and not in the form of a new plant, but in the form of extending the output of our existing fleet. So, for example, my Coney plant in Seneca, South Carolina, we operated a Coney plant for up to 44 megawatts. We're in the process of operating Brunswick, McGuire, and Catawba for a total of 225 megawatts. So if you quickly do the math, that's pretty close to 300 megawatts. Anyone know the size of a small modular reactor? It's about 300 megawatts. And so just through uprates, we'll put an additional 300 megawatts on the grid earlier than we're planning on putting new nuclear in the mid-2030s. We'll have the 225 megawatts in service by 2031. We're also evaluating what's called cycle extension. So I mentioned our refueling outages. So half of our fleet operate on an 18-month operating cycle. That means they operate for 18 months, then we shut down for a refueling outage. The other half operates on a 2-year cycle. I mean, they operate for 2 years, we shut down for refueling cycle. We're looking to transition Harris, McGuire, and Catawba to 24-month refueling cycles, and that does two things. That limits the number of refueling outages that we have, which maximize the availability of our units, but it also saves our customers money because refueling outages are pretty expensive from a cost perspective. So now just by limiting the number of refueling outages that essentially our customers pay for, we're saving our customers money and maximizing the availability of our units. Regarding the future, and this is where Mr. Nolan took part of my discussion, we are implementing actions to support potential deployment of advanced nuclear or new nuclear, whatever title you want to tag to the smaller reactors by the mid-2030s. And it's driven by our integrated resource plan. In our current integrated resource plan that we update about every 18 months to 2 years, there's an initial deployment of new nuclear starting 300 megawatts in service by 2034, 300 in service by 2035, and then every year after that, it's about another 300 megawatts. In the last IRP in our carbon plan update, the North Carolina Utility Commission asked us to evaluate what would it take to deploy larger units. Not that they were asking us to deploy larger units, but just evaluate what exists that potentially could support development or deployment of larger units. This is a natural question by the North Carolina Utility Commission because we're one of 2 utilities that own a combined operating license for an AP 1000. and we've maintained that license. And so if for some reason we made a decision to move forward with a large unit, we already have a location, we have the combined operating license, we would just need to update that license to the current AP 1000 design. And so it's a natural question by the Utility Commission, okay, you have this stuff, what would it look like to consider deployment of advanced or larger units? And we owe that answer to them here by the end of this month. We're pursuing SMRs on one of our fossil plants, our Blues Creek Station in Stokes County. It's a 2,200 megawatt fossil plant. We're starting the process with what's called an early site permit. On the Blues Creek property, it's a ways from the plant, but on the Blues Creek property. And our early site permit, we're developing that using what's called a plant parameter envelope, which means this is the boundary of the area where we could deploy small reactors, and we can deploy multiple technologies. So in the early site permit, we don't describe a specific technology. We describe a boundary where technologies could fit. This is a 4-year process. The first 2 years is gathering meteorological data, pulling together the license application, and then 2 years for the NRC to review and approve it. And we're on track to submit that application by the end of this year. We have not picked a technology, but we're involved with a number of the different reactor designers, both in light water, small modular reactors, and both in the advanced reactors like the TerraPowers, the X Energies, things of that nature. If you get an early site permit, and even if you don't build, the early site permit is good for 20 years. And after 20 years, you could go through and you could renew that early site permit for up to 10 years. So it is a very valuable step in the process that once you get it, you have it for a long time, where you can still work through the gates you need to make a decision if you're truly going to deploy new nuclear or not. So what's needed to gain momentum? As a regulated utility, it's our responsibility to balance the needs and priorities of our customers, our regulators, our investors, who are increasingly interested in the most reliable, least cost generation option. And so I mentioned we continue to work with reactor vendors, and we work with some of our peer utilities on looking for opportunities to maximize learning, but more importantly, to look for efficiencies as we evaluate what it would take to deploy new nuclear. Because we and others are concerned with the price tag. It is not cheap to deploy new nuclear, and it's long. We're using on an average about a 10-year period from the time you say go until the first COD. We are engaging with key stakeholders at the state level in discussing policies that support advanced nuclear deployment while ensuring affordability and reliability. So every time we have a discussion with our state regulator, and even with our local community, we talk about reliability, but just as important, affordability. Because that's what they want. They want their power on, but they also they want to make sure it's not too expensive. And so we always, keep affordability and reliability together. To support our existing fleet, we're working with key legislators to ensure continued support from federal incentives, such as preserving the production tax credits. Being a large fleet, the PTC is a very valuable opportunity for the Duke fleet. Last year, we were able to get about $550 million in tax credits, and that does not go into our pockets. That goes directly to the customers. So it helps to lower the customer's bill, and we think the tax credits that we'll get for this year will be somewhere around the same area. So those production tax credits are very, very important to us. So in in closing, electrical demand continues to increase across the Carolinas. Nuclear industry is an ideal clean energy resource to meet the need. It benefits our customers, our communities, by generating large amounts of electricity in a reliable, efficient, affordable manner. In my opinion, in short, nuclear does check all the boxes. We really just need to make sure we can figure out how to make new nuclear happen, and just don't take our eye off of the existing fleet and make sure that we continue to operate it with excellence. So I'll stop there, and I have a couple of minutes for any questions.
Thank you for joining us. I'm curious, when you think about deployment of nuclear, there's the axiom about cost and speed and quality. I think maybe safety could be a proxy for quality, maybe. Where are the levers that you can pull to essentially either accelerate deployments or reduce the cost?
Yeah, I would say one of the primary things you can do is don't deploy without a design, a completed design. Really need to make sure that whatever reactor design that you build, that design has got to be in a state where it's predictable in its ability to be constructed. And what we've seen in history is that some of those constructions started without a complete design, and that just results in additional costs. I'll give you an example. When I was speaking with my Vogtle teammates that deployed my Southern teammates that deployed Vogtle 3 and 4, they talked a little bit about the initial design, but then when they transitioned to Vogtle 4 was 30% less than Vogtle 3. And you think about, why was that the case? And it was a simple answer. The design was matured, and it was less rework. And it was 40%. And so if we get a design, you start building to scale, you will go down the cost curve. You really just need to get started. But it starts with a design. You need to have a design, and because that has a direct impact on cost and constructability. Hello?
Sorry, it's a follow-up to that question. How then do you reconcile innovation and new design or experimentation with the design of our nuclear reactors while trying to make sure you have the final design before you deploy?
Yeah, so a lot of the designs, especially on the advanced reactor side, such as the TerraPower design, X-Energy design, those are truly new designs. But those companies, I can tell you, they are really leveraging technology as they build their design in a computer system. Because that's really the only thing, because you don't have the operating experience, right? Really, you only have the operating experience from the light water reactors. So like the Westinghouse AP300 reactor is 70% of the AP1000. The GE BWRX 300 is very similar, except with a bunch of enhanced safety features, to plants that we operate today, like my Brunswick site. And so you have some experience with the SMRs and their designs, because they use a lot of the same components, the fuel, things of that nature that we use today. The advanced reactors is where things are slightly different. And really, those advanced reactor guys are leveraging technology to make sure before deployment they are as close to a design where they have some confidence in. At least that's been our interaction with them.
Hi, question for you. Susan McLeod, and I've run a global support organization before, so you're talking operational excellence and the questions that just came from here. I'm sitting here thinking about global support and operational efficiencies and to your point, resiliency, and you cannot have an issue.
That's right.
How I just can't even imagine like KPIs. How do you track? I mean, how do you plan for that operational efficiency in this environment?
Yeah, I mean, this is what we do every day. I mean, we are very rigorous in how we monitor our performance. And this is just not Duke. This is the industry in general. And some of it's driven by how we're regulated and how oversight is provided by the Institute of Nuclear Power Operation, which drives us towards excellence. And we have hundreds and hundreds of metrics that we monitor our performance. But more importantly, we leverage each other in the industry to share operating experience so we don't repeat the same mistakes over and over again. And to me, that's the biggest key, because if you're looking at a metric is a lagging indicator, right? The event has already happened. And so how do you make sure that you stay ahead of any challenges? And really, as an industry, we really work together and share operating experience. To me, that's the key. All right, and I think my time is up. It is? All right. Thank you.
You want that?